when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into what we've learned. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr. And tonight we are going to talk about what we've learned, what we have gathered, what kind of information we've gathered over the past year since the last time Aaron and I did this pod. Basically, have we changed any strategies? Have we changed the way we approach things? Have we learned anything about evaluating players, evaluating certain positions, whatever it might be? It could be anything. It could be about life, doing a podcast or whatever it is. What have we learned about? We're going to talk about that tonight. I kind of screwed up the beginning because I didn't change the title of the pod. I don't know if this is going out the right way or not, but hopefully it is. Let's check in with the boys, and then we will get into what we've learned. Andy, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing well, and it looks like it worked, whatever you did. I was able to tweet out the link, and it looked fine.
Sweet.
It didn't say grudge match anymore, so yeah, good here. It snowed up here, but I think it's been cold down by you in Florida there as well, John, so it's not like you're getting too much of a break from it down there.
Yeah, no snow, but I'll tell you what, I think it was like 34 or something like that this morning, and the feel like temperature is 27. So for Florida, that's pretty damn cold. I had to go to work in it, but I luckily it's pretty bad in like the first couple hours, but like it warms up pretty quickly. It's not too bad. It was like 50, and it was actually really nice to work in.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, up here we don't get a break from it. I gotta winterize my camper, and I can't pressure wash in 30 degrees up here, unfortunately.
Aaron, you got any snow up there in Minnesota?
Yeah, we did get some. I just mulched my leaves with the lawnmower right before we got all the frost and snow and whatnot, so it was great timing, thankfully.
Awesome, awesome. I am excited. I have made quite a few purchases over the past couple of weeks, but the one that I'm most excited about, and I'm not necessarily bragging, I'm just really excited about it, is I got a new fridge that makes craft cocktail ice. And so now when I make my old fashions, I don't have to have the cubes I don't have to the cubes in the freezer or anything like that. It just automatically makes these beautiful spheres for me, and I get to make my drink that way. So you'll see me drinking my drink with my cocktail ice tonight, and I'm very excited about that. That is one thing I've learned. Sometimes you gotta treat yourself, and that's what I did with my new fridge. But like I said, we are here to talk about what we've learned to help you guys, not just sit here and talk about how dumb we were and how smart we are now, but hopefully help you guys be able to make your better determinations, better strategize for supplemental drafts, for Devy drafts, all that kind of stuff. And so that's what we're going to be here to talk about tonight. And then I had a challenge, and we'll get into it later, but I had a challenge that I gave to the boys, because I have a big what I learned later on that we'll save for a little bit later on in the pod. But we have a pretty big challenge. Hopefully the boys can rise to the challenge, and we'll have a good time then. But who wants to start us off? We start off slow. Anyone got like a quick and easy lesson learned that we can go ahead and dive into with?
I guess I can go with just something that I've noticed after a few years of playing, specifically in campus to fantasy football leagues. So we're you're starting guys on the college side each week. You're potentially having a waiver wire. This is specific for leagues that have a limited amount of claims, but when you are able to put waiver claims in during the season in those fantasy leagues, I find that early to middle seems to be kind of cream of the crop, the best or most optimal time to make those claims. So not only do you not miss out on, something at the end of the year, whether there's a deadline for getting your claims in, or maybe just all the good players have already been scooped up by then. But yeah, you're able to help your team early on in the season. That can continue to help you week after week, hopefully contend, or even if you're a rebuilding team, you still scoop up some of that good talent. Now, I'm not saying to pick up guys after 1 week because you can get into a lot of trouble with those 1 week sample size traps, but I'm just saying early to middle. I kind of like the middle personally, but any of those ranges seems like a really good sweet spot for waivers on the college side if you have some limited. So if you have unlimited, I mean, you can start claiming guys early, yes, but you don't really have to strategize nearly as much. But yeah, that's just something I've picked up on. It fluctuates year after year. Like, for example, I know Andy was really quick to pull some of the waiver claims this season and even last with some success too. But I think last year, maybe more than this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just something that I've noticed. Year after year, it does change a bit. But if you wait till the very end, usually it's picked over. You're maybe going to be out of luck. Depends on the year, but that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I would agree, and I definitely had more. And our league has four claims, if I'm not mistaken. So I think what happened last year for me, when I got like Ty Felton, Caleb Johnson, and I want to say one other guy that had pretty decent draft capital. I don't think that that's the what you should expect. Like this year, I did the same thing. I did early waiver claims. I used one on a CFF guy, Bo Sparks, and then I completely whiffed on another one with Dylan Lonergan. And then the other two, I think Cameron Dickey was a good one, and Bear Bachmeyer could end up being a good one, but right now it's kind of like, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Um, but I feel like if you're expecting to get like all of your waiver claims being day two, day one guys, it's probably not going to happen. But I do think that earlier is better versus waiting to get some of those later guys. But especially if you're looking at it from a CFF standpoint, because the early breakouts are obviously the ones that are going to be scoring points for you all season. Whereas if you're waiting till the middle of the season for a later breakout guy, sure, he might have more Devy value than some of the guys you got earlier in the season if you're lucky, but he hasn't been scoring points for you um, for the majority of the season if you've just been sitting on that waiver claim for too long.
Yeah, I was gonna say honestly, this is. I think we talked about this last time too, Aaron. And I remember last year, Pofeli Ashlock was the hottest name. Was it last year or the year prior? Where Pofeli Ashlock was the hottest name, and people were losing their minds, like spending all of their fab, wasting their entire budget for the entire season, whether you had four or unlimited or whatever. And it and I mean, not to say that he's never done anything, but compared to what people are, treating him like, it obviously has not worked out for them. And then I remember, obviously, like a couple weeks later, if I'm not mixing up the seasons here, then Caleb Johnson was available for Andy, and it's like these players become available, and it's usually like week 3 or 4 before you can truly even say, is this player true? Like, is this real, or is this just, oh, they were playing Mercer, or whatever it is. And I will say, I guess to like I want to I feel like I did a pretty good job this year. I waited and I got Nate Shepard and I got Caleb Hawkins, two players that I'm very excited about, especially for C2C purposes, but even for Devy purposes as well. Um, but then I was a week late on Desmond Roebuck, and Aaron had already grabbed him at that point. So, like while I feel like I definitely am probably the most patient of all of the three of us when it comes to waivers. I think I actually was too patient this year, and I didn't even use my fourth claim. I forgot that it was regular season only, and then I was reading through the bylaws and it hit me this week. Oh wait, we're no longer in the regular season, so I didn't even use my fourth claim, and my third claim. I don't want to say I wasted, but I started getting some QB injuries and bye weeks and things like that, and so I ended up adding whatever the hell his name is, the Air Force QB. Svazva or whatever. I don't even remember what his name is. Doesn't even matter. And not even to say it was a terrible pickup or anything. Like he's had some good games, but it definitely was not a Devy pickup or anything like that. It was more of a kind of a throwaway. So I would have much rather have had Desmond Roebuck or somebody to that nature. So I want to take my time. I want to do it the right way, but at the same time, I probably need to be a little more aggressive after like week 3, week 4, and really trying to find, okay, who else is that diamond in the rough, and not let players like Aaron and Andy and whoever else like snatch them either the same week or the week before. I want to try and be ahead of the game, kind of like I was with Shepard and Hawkins. Not to say that they weren't being talked about at all or anything, but like no one was like, "Oh, you got to spend all your fab on them" or anything like that. And I'm looking at them that week, and I was like, I want these players more than anything, and I spent I think like 3/4 of my fab on those two players because I want them no matter what. And then everyone else was like throwing $5 at them, $8, whatever, and it was like, and then of course the next week it was like, no, you have to have these guys 100% fab, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fair. And if you're able to you have to have some patience for it, but some injuries happen and you get like a King Miller at USC, who's kind of a breakout guy. That's awesome. But yeah, sometimes have to wait for those situations to open up. But yeah, early to mid, I mean, that's how I got like Omar Cooper. Very happy with the production that he brings throughout a season, for example. So it was funny. I think I was egging John on. I'm like, you won't pick up Griffin Wild.
I should have. I should have picked him up instead of wasting my pick. At least I would have gotten a player,
Does not pay to wait. Yeah. No. But I'm curious, what do you guys have from things that you've learned this season? It could be strategy, it could be player takes, other things like that.
Well, mine was, the player takes, obviously, there's the guys that we hit on, we get guys we missed on, you try to learn stuff from the things you missed. But just from a more, zooming out standpoint, drafting and the supplemental drafting, and it's hard to like look at one season and say like this is how all supplemental drafts are going to be. But with the way the transfer portal works now, and these teams, having new players, it seems like they could have switched their roster 3 times between January and when the season finally starts. Trying to hit on some of these transfer Devy players it ended up being a lot more difficult than maybe I had anticipated. Now, it didn't hurt on some of my picks. I got guys like Kendrick Raphael, who ended up being a decent CFF guy to have. I'm trying to look around. There was other times where it ended up not working out for me with some of the FCS guys that I was liking, like Giovanni Gibson, Elijah Tau Tolliver, guys that just really didn't do anything. And to me, I feel like these transfer players are a lot more volatile, maybe less so than the freshmen, but still not enough to be, so committed to and drafting in supplemental drafts, when maybe we could be focusing those picks in the later rounds on guys that we know are going to be CFF starters for us, guys like Junior Vandeross or Ted Hurst. You're not looking at him for NFL upside, but hey, do I really want to take a risk on like this true junior or redshirt junior who's transferring to a Power 4 program for the first time? Or maybe I just take Ted Hurst, who's I know is going to be the wide receiver 1 for Georgia State or wherever he plays for, and is going to score a ton of points. So that's kind of the lens I want to look through a little bit differently in the next offseason. But it's tough too, because there are guys that just, we'll draft those CFF guys earlier too. So finding that sweet spot of when to switch that idea or that thought process up is going to be what the challenging part is.
I think I basically have the same thought process here, but I kind of said it in a different way, which was I don't want to get like overhyped on players in what was such an ambiguous offseason where like, there really weren't that many studs that were still in school, or anything like that, like proven studs going into the season. It was a lot of would be's, could be's and all that kind of stuff. Like you said, Andy, there was a lot of transfers, which obviously we're gonna have to get used to. Like there's going to be a lot of transfers. That's not going to change, I don't think, but there weren't a lot of like proven transfers. And so I think I personally, and maybe you as well, got overhyped on certain players, like, for say like a Hudson Clement or, somebody like that, where it's like, all right, this player had, looked pretty good at West Virginia, put up pretty solid numbers. Now he's transferring over to what should be, pretty good offense and everything. But that's okay to like that player, but I feel like I probably pushed him up too much because there weren't the normal studs there to be like, oh, like, oh, these guys are going to go for like the first 5, 6, 7 rounds or whatever. And so I feel like I ended up pushing them up too much, and maybe that kind of goes along with what you're saying, where it's like, okay, this guy's a FCS transfer or a G5 transfer, and he did okay, but we know a lot of times that it takes them a year or something like that. So maybe we want to have those people on our radars, but maybe we don't want to push them up too much, because I could probably give you at least a handful of other examples of guys that like I fell in love with or was at least fairly excited about. Obviously, Caden Lee is another one that wasn't even a transfer, but obviously things changing around him and everything. We saw who he was and what he was the year prior. This year has definitely not worked out for him. So I guess I don't know exactly where to pivot to, but I think that's where we have to start pivoting. Okay, like Andy was saying, okay, maybe we start going CFF heavy for a little bit, like, nah, I'm never going to be the CFF only guy or anything like that. That's just not my style. But maybe we switch and pivot to CFF only for a couple rounds, or maybe we go young and just say, hey, like the hit rates aren't going to be great either way. At least let's go with some true freshmen and just hope for the best, like in good situations, things like that. So I think that's going to be my focus for next year. Now, obviously, I don't think we have nearly as much of an ambiguous situation next year. We have quite a few studs that we're excited about going into the offseason. So I don't think that's really going to be a major issue. But in future years, if we have another lull like that, where we have a huge class just kind of take out all of these studs, I think I'm going to try my best to do a better job of pivoting. And that's not even to say that I feel like I did a poor job or anything like that. I think we all had some hits and misses this year, but and probably more misses than normal. But I'm sure that I could probably do a better job. All being said.
I'm glad that you brought this topic up, Andy, because this was on my mind as well. It's like, what can we learn from these transfer situations? And I think that there's a couple of very important trends that we can utilize for in the future. And one of those being, what kind of a transfer up are they? Are they guys who've been, 3 to 4 years already in college, let's say at a G5 level? Because we saw numerous guys like that flop, and they're guys who have experience in college. You think, oh, these experienced guys going to step up in that level of competition, not skip a beat. No, there's a lot of flops. There's Eric Rivers, Devontae Ross, Krishan McCray. If you consider Hudson Clement stepping up in competition, I don't know if you really can. Makai Hughes, you could maybe say Javion Thomas too. Going from Pac-12 to now Big Ten, like those. That's a big step up in competition, even though we maybe didn't realize it at the time. You saw a lot of guys who had experience struggle basically when they were stepping up in competition levels and just getting into new offensive environments. Like, could there be some post-type sleepers from those guys? Maybe, but we're much less excited today than we were coming into the season for much of those names, at least from a CFF standpoint. But even some Devy hope for a couple of those guys, just not going to happen, right? But who succeeded? That's the question. So, okay, maybe a little bit of skepticism with those guys who have some experience going up in level of competition into transfer situations. Who do we want to target? Well, some of these freshmen who break out at the G5 level. You look at the Ahmad Hardys, you look at the Fluff Bothwells, both true freshmen from last season, going up to the SEC level and playing quite well. You look at Wayshawn Parker, same thing. At Washington State, I believe. Now at Utah, he's been explosive. He hasn't been a workhorse this year. He hasn't been like a true bell cow, but if he can get there, let's say next year, he's been a very efficient and interesting back. And then even at the wide receiver position, you could look at a guy like Joseph Williams. I'm just trying to think of, I didn't list a lot of like wide receiver options, but that's one that comes to mind from Tulsa going to Colorado. Not that he's been the alpha there this year, but he could be set up for a pretty strong career. It's because these guys show that were quite talented right away in college as true freshmen. And they said, we belong here. In fact, we even belong at a higher level of competition. Big time schools went after them. And we saw some success there. And sure, there's going to be a few flops either way. When we're talking about these transfers to different levels of competition and all that. But that's one trend that I noticed with some of the freshmen going in their second season, maybe up in a level of competition.
Yeah, I think I can add on to that even more because where you're saying like these true freshmen or freshmen that transferred after their freshman season, they were looking great, but we can also look at some players that have transferred from maybe worse situations to better situations. Looking at like a Justice Haynes, looking at a Quinshon Judkins from from the year prior. These players that have gone to better teams, and we weren't the biggest Justice Haynes fans. Andy and I were not the biggest Justice Haynes fans. Aaron always was. But then just look at what he did once he got to a team that is known for putting out quality running backs, and or at the very least being very good for college production for running backs, even if they don't necessarily like always put out like round one running backs in the NFL draft or anything. Like they're known for their rushing production. Obviously, Ohio State is known for putting out quality players and everything like that. So we can look at certain players that have transferred to these quality spots, and then we can look at other players that either haven't transferred to quality spots or have stayed in poor spots. Looking at like a Bryson Washington, looking at a Jonah Coleman, players like that. These are players that we were super excited about in the offseason, and you have to say that the excitement is waning at the very least for these players because they're just not in the greatest of situations when you start hitting, especially in like a Washington situation, that you start hitting these like Big Ten conference play, and you're not Big Ten level per se, and it's really difficult for you to go put up that kind of offense and do the things that you want to do. So Jonah Coleman looks amazing when he's playing against your FCS teams and your lower level Big Ten, but you start playing against Ohio State and whoever else, and next thing you know, like you're putting up like 20 yards. So I almost want to say, we want. I hate to. I've never. Well, that's not true. I've done a whole thing about like which teams actually put players into the NFL and have the hit rates and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, maybe I need to focus on that even more, and not just saying I've always been at the recruit level, but now that there's so much transferring and all that kind of stuff, maybe we need to say, okay, well, who's actually at these schools now, and who's at the schools that aren't putting players into the NFL at that kind of rate. Maybe that's something I want to focus on even more this year or upcoming, for the future.
Yeah, I mean it's tough
We're
to
all
say.
shocked.
Well, I was just gonna add, like, I don't know what the best thing to do is as far as like teams are concerned, because with the transfer portal, I feel like there's more of a leveling out of the playing field, and I think you're gonna see more of these schools that haven't traditionally put players into the NFL start to consistently put players into the NFL. If they got the boosters and the finances to build a competitive team, which I think you're seeing Indiana do it. It's more of a Kurt Signetti thing, but now that there's some steam behind it, there's room to build, and I think more programs are going to be apt to do that in the NIL era, even with the new restrictions with like the caps being put on. It just kind of levels the playing field a little bit. So it's still growing. We're still years away from figuring it out entirely, but we'll try to find the patterns as they arise.
Every year we kind of learn that there's also players that we just can't predict what's going to happen with a few of them. Like the Nick Singleton fall off, like that was steep, and there was seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. You could speculate that Nick Singleton falling off this season for Penn State was injury related. He actually looked excellent this last game against Indiana. So a stout defense, right? A very, very competitive game. And he stepped up big time. He looked more healthy than he has all year. But you just sometimes can't predict. There's a few of those things, and usually it's injury related, right? Each year, like the Keishon Butte drop off in Devy or for college purposes. Like he was a stud as a freshman, but obviously the injury really set his career back. And there's other things that can contribute to that for players as well. But a lot of it does kind of start with injuries. So who knows what CJ Baxter could have been at Texas pre-injury, I suppose. But we have to take those things into account. And sometimes you can't predict it at all, but sometimes you can start to say like, this guy, there's some injury concerns. Could consider maybe dropping those guys down, especially at the running back position, where if you lose like even 10% of your athleticism, like that's a big thing for a college prospect, for a player.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of too many running backs that we've seen have like pretty major injuries and come back to exactly who they were. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. We've seen Jadarian Price do it, but how many years did it really take before he got that back? He's a senior in college now. Like it took him 3-4 years before he really got it back, and even then. Whether it's the team or whatever, like he's never truly been given his shot. And I don't know if it's like they don't trust him or if it's just Jeremiah Love's that good or whatever it is. But Jadarian Price has unfortunately never really gotten his shot. Um, that being said, so I guess that kind of goes into you were talking about Nicholas Singleton. That reminds me of another one that I had on here, and there's a reason why we look at full season stats, and like one game doesn't make or break anything and all that kind of stuff. Singleton has been terrible all year long. Now don't get me wrong, that one week, this past week, basically took him from I don't want him, I don't even want him on my top 75 to he's back in the mix for things. But that he's never back to what he was prior, and I feel like people are always going to hold on to hope. I've talked to so many people in the past week or so, and it's a lot of the same stuff. Oh, well, Nicholas Singleton's going to kill the combine, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I completely agree, and that's where I've always been, is he's going to kill the combine and someone's going to fall in love with them. But you have to have some amount of production to go along with it, or else you're just Miles Sanders, or or somebody to that effect. And I
Donovan
mean, I don't
Edwards.
yeah, I don't even necessarily mean to do the Penn State comp there or whatever, but it's like I don't. I think that people have to look at the entire body of work with Nicholas Singleton or players like that. I'm just focusing on him right now, and just say like, okay, this last week doesn't fix everything. Like we still have some major problems there. And whether it's good or bad, let's look at the entire body of work, the entire season, the entire college career, and we can say Nicholas Singleton's always had problems. It's not just this year. This year was a little more prevalent, but there's always been some issues there with the Penn State running back. And then what's his face? I can't even. Uh, Katron Allen's always just kind of been like hanging around, hanging around. Now he has kind of fallen off. He had a hot start to the year. I don't know what changed, but I wish we could have seen him continue what he was doing prior. But I guess that whole team's kind of fallen apart. All right, I just have smiling faces, so I guess we're moving on here. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, I was looking at Jeff's comment. He was in the chat. He says, "Take Miles Sanders catching strays out here." That's fair. I was gonna throw some strays at Donovan Edwards, the Michigan running back, because I think very similar. Like I think we're seeing Nick Singleton as like the fancy version of him, basically, of Donovan Edwards, where there's been a lot of like athleticism. There's been some highlight plays. There's been a lot of hope. Like he'll test really well. He's got the size. He's got, this and that. But if they're not natural runners, and maybe there's some injury concern there too, that has to be taken into account in our analysis of these players for sure. Yep.
Yeah,
Andy,
I would
you want
just
to
say
bash Nicholas Singleton or Miles Sanders?
no,
at
no.
all?
I was going to do the opposite. Like at least with Nick Singleton, we've got two really good, productive years to fall back on and say like, okay, he's shown us two really solid seasons. And if he finishes out this season strong, like he did last week, I will be all the way back in. I'm just waiting for the opportunity. So, I get the comparison to like Donovan Edwards, but I was always one that thought he was ranked too high, simply because of he was athletic, whereas Nick Singleton, you know, I was happy that he was athletic, but I don't think it contributed to my ranking him high. I just liked him because he was productive on the field and he ripped big plays all the time, especially his freshman season. So. Hopefully he bounces back because I really do like Nick Singleton, and maybe this is like an opportunity for us to get him at a discount if he does have like a really strong finish. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
I mean, yeah, I feel like he has to finish the year. I mean, he's only sitting at a 6.7% big time run rate the past two seasons. Like that's not going to cut it, especially for a guy that you're talking about with so much athleticism and everything. You're looking at the uh, Donovan Edwards might be the best comp there because you're talking about probably vision issues and things like that, that we obviously had with Edwards. But I think I've crapped on Singleton enough here. Why don't we get into another one? Do you guys have another one for us, or should we get into my big one? Because it's going to probably get a little ranty, a little spicy. So I was going to save that one for last.
Ooh. Well, if you want to save it for last, I got something I'd like to just discuss because, we everybody tends to do this to some degree early in the season, especially when we're trying to put out content, analysis. But we just have to be careful overreacting to those small sample sizes, especially in the cases where you've already seen a large sample size of what that player is. So this isn't to say, okay, don't care if like a freshman breaks out in the first few weeks. Like, no, we should take note of that, right? That's very, very good for us to see. But it's these guys where we've seen year after year, like they're probably not an NFL guy, or they're not like going to be a maybe a high end efficient player for our campus to Canton teams or otherwise. And I'm looking at guys in the likes of like Harrison Wallace, like who transferred into Ole Miss, right? Those first 3 weeks, very much a mirage. He had, strong target share, production those first 3 weeks, but it was just fool's gold when you look at it. Or even look at guys like a Jonah Coleman, who started off hot, but we have a large enough sample size to say he's a good player, but maybe he's not a great player. And I know we always have to have that hope or that possibility that they really did transform their game. And there was some signs that Jonah Coleman, he got in better shape this year, slimmed down, got more athletic, but we have a large enough sample size. You can go down the list. Robert Henry, he was an amazing producer the first 4 weeks. I mean, between 28 and 38 points per game for the first 4 weeks, but he really has tailed off there. And some of that's touchdown luck. Some of it's just, he is not quite as good as Robert Henry at the G5 level showed early in the season, at least. So we saw it out of quarterbacks, Thomas Castellanos. We saw it for Taylon Green at Arkansas. Like, he was a stud early in the season. People were like, oh, is this the next Konami code? Like, big-time quarterback. He's got the height. He's got the athleticism, the arm. It's not really true. Well, yes, he has some of those things, but it's not like he put it all together, right? So just we have to be careful when we have that previous sample size saying that they're kind of a meh player overall. So, but that early season production. I will say, not to go on too much of a rant, but it can be somewhat predictive at the wide receiver position because you get all sorts of guys. You get the Chris Bells, you get the Mario Cravers, Chris Brazel, Omar Coopers, Jeremiah Smith, Jeremy Bernard, Bryant Wesco's. All those guys were going off early in the season and showing off as studs. So it's not like it's always fool's gold. You kind of have to parse out like what kind of prospect are they in the first place, what they've done in previous years. Does that match up? And what their situation is too, right? If they're walking into a huge opportunity, there's nobody else there. Yes, that gives us some further confidence to actually buy in that this is a real sample size and something we should expect to continue.
I think
I like it.
Jonah Coleman is a good one to bring up. And it's not because I don't like Jonah Coleman. I liked him in the offseason, and I still like him now. But I think early in the season, I liked him way too much. And now it's just sort of like, okay, he's back to like the, second round running back, maybe, early second round running back, like rookie pick, perhaps like late first round. But there are several guys that I like quite a bit better than Jonah Coleman, just based on what we've seen the last few weeks. He's scoring touchdowns. I would say he's a better receiver than probably we've seen in his career. Just that's obvious based on what he's doing out of the backfield. But the big time run rate has always been. You look at last season, it was I can't do math in my head, but let's say around 7%. This year, again, around 7%. So it's just kind of who he is. He had those huge games to begin with, 177 yards, and then followed up with 111 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that pops off the page at you, and you think, okay, this guy's going to be one of the better running backs in this class. And then the Big Ten schedule starts, and he's a good running back. And that's what I thought in the offseason, and that's what I think right now. But he's not like this elite tier running back that maybe I had high hopes for in the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I like that. I also think what I've learned this year is that people still don't understand advanced metrics and like how there's thresholds that we should look for. And obviously it's easy for me to say, it's easy for Andy to say that's what we focus on. So I mean, we kind of know, we've learned what we're looking for, where the cutoffs are and all that kind of stuff. But when you have people claiming on Twitter that Emmett Johnson from Nebraska is the most elusive back in the game, or whatever it was. It's just like, all right, yeah, I think you're looking at you're looking at volume metrics and you're confusing that for advanced metrics and things like that. When we're looking at a 5.5% big time run rate for Emmett Johnson, like that's not good. That is not an elusive player, a player that's breaking tackles and stuff like that. They might be breaking tackles because they have so many touches. And that's where people get confused with like a Mekhi Hughes and Emmett Johnson, players like that. It's like, yeah, you can do it at a lower level, but you start moving up to higher levels or the NFL, and the NFL just laughs at you and goes, all right, dude, yeah, go sit back on the bench. And I think people are kind of learning that with what's his name, Kyle Monangai. I think right now they're learning that lesson with Kyle Monangai. How many people have hyped Kyle Monangai in the past like 9 months or a year about how amazing he is? And don't get me wrong, he had that one really good week last week or the week prior, whatever it was. But then this week, DeAndre Swift comes right back. Swift is the man, and we can't even say that Swift is some amazing running back at this point in his career. But who's Kyle Monangai? He's a 6%, 7%, big time run rate kind of guy. He's not gonna go out there and wow you in most instances. And maybe he can be your goal line back. Maybe he can be that kind of thing. And that's what we would assume for an Emmett Johnson. But by looking at these advanced metrics, you can kind of, I mean, it's not fair to ever look at one metric and be like, oh, this is who a player is. But sometimes with these running backs, it's just that simple. You look at big time run rate and you go, nope. And as mean as that is, it's just the God honest truth.
Yeah, and in running back analysis too, like you said, I mean, he can be really elusive. Like it doesn't a low big time run rate doesn't mean he's not, but like you said, it's going to indicate other things like a lack of burst or a lack of vision at the second level and long speed, etc. So yeah, it's important to look at that whole big picture, like you said, other than just the counting stats. So that is maybe the downside if you just only have the film based analysis for a player. Is like, yeah, they'll pop off at different times. Like you watch them in a bowl game, you watch them in the Senior Bowl, etc. It's like, oh, this guy's a stud. It's like, well, take that big sample size. What have they done in their college career? And then, I mean, you could obviously glean some things from the film then at that point, but try to have a well-rounded look at these prospects.
Yeah, it's easy to lead or be top five in Power Four running backs and missed tackles forced when you lead the Power Five in rushing attempts. So that's just all I'll say about Emmett Johnson.
It kind of reminds me of the people that go, well, they win more games when they run more. It's like, no, they run more when they're winning. It's like, correlation, or yeah, correlation does not equal causation, or whatever, however you say that.
I think you got it.
Yeah. All right, Andy, you got another one for us before we get into the big rant?
No. Well, I will say that big time run rate, although a very useful statistic to me, it can still do me wrong from time to time. And Ahmad Hardy and Justice Haynes were those examples this season.
Sure.
So, is it going to make me change how I do things? No. So I don't know if I learned anything. But
Well, I think, like I said, there's thresholds, and generally speaking, when you're looking at those thresholds, it works. That there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be players that you're going to miss on and stuff like
I
that.
will say, not to interrupt you, but to
No, you're
interrupt
good.
you, real quick with Justice Haynes. Um, Towards the end of the offseason this year, I did notice that his big time run rate didn't hit the metric that I wanted, but his big time runs per attempt, or big time run yards per attempt, did hit the threshold that I like to see, which is two. And I think that's more indicative of breaking out when you are breaking those 15-yard runs, you're turning them into 25 or 50 or 75-yard runs, which is what Justice Haynes did, and we saw him do it a lot at Michigan this season. So I won't. I will say that maybe I need to focus on that a little bit more if they're not hitting that big time run rate metric of 7.5% or 7% that I'm usually looking for.
I like it. We're always looking. Well, I do like to caution people about just trying to find the new hot metric and everything, because a lot of times it ends up being just garbage. So I'm not saying that what Andy just said is garbage at all. I there probably is some some stickiness to that one, but like there's so many metrics out there when people show you the C to C charts and the graphs and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything, man. All right, so I'm gonna get a little ranty here, get on my soapbox here, but I think that I have earned the right to do this. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not. So I feel what I've learned this year is that Devy analysts are scared, and they're just scared to be wrong. And so what do? They go and they look at their 5-star recruits and the 4-star, high 4-star recruits. They go to the best schools, and then they follow those players, and they just stick with them and stick with them and stick with them and stick with them and stick with them. And it takes them so long to ever give up on those players, or the player that they hate, that was a 3-star, at Colorado or whatever it might be, that transfers over to, who's like, say, like an Arizona State, or something like that, like those kind of players. They couldn't possibly be good because, they were nobody, and it takes them forever and ever and ever to fall in love with those players, even if they start showing out at a high level. And I think I've done a great job of always being one of the first people to come around on players. Now that has also come with being way too high on certain players as well. So I'm not saying it's a perfect, I'm batting 1,000 here or anything like that. There's definitely been some swing and misses. But along with that has been some huge, huge grand slams, home runs and grand slams. I don't know why I'm doing baseball right now. I don't like baseball. But I want to challenge Devy analysts, C2C analysts, Devy analysts, anyone in the college football realm, space, whatever. I want to challenge you guys and myself, even as much, like, just be willing to accept new information. Be willing to accept that this player's better than you thought or this player's worse than you thought, and be willing to change your mind with a quickness, because I still have people telling me today, I'm not exaggerating. Today I still have people telling me that Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a quality quarterback in the NFL. He's just been injured this year. He's just been this. He's just been that. And it's like, guys, what have we seen in the last 2 years that tells you at any point that Garrett Nussmeier was going to be a good quarterback in the NFL? Never. And it's just because they're holding on to what they were thinking 2 years ago. And I'm not trying to like bash people or anything like that. I'm saying be quicker to react. And so, with that, I challenged before we got on here Aaron and Andy. I said, I have always been the loudmouth. I've always been the guy who's been willing to be right or wrong or whatever, but I'm going to go out and say that Mekhi Lemon is overhyped right now. I'm going to say that Jordan Tyson is underhyped right now, like things like that. I've always been willing to be that guy. I want our podcast to be strong enough and brave enough to actually say, hey, we can put out some real takes and we can change our minds and we can say who we believe in, who we don't believe in, that kind of thing. So I don't want it just to be me. So I challenged Aaron, I challenged Andy. I said, who are you way higher or way lower than consensus on? Let's get these takes out there and let's not be scared to be Devy analysts. Let's help our listeners and let's say, hey, these are the players that I truly believe in. And I always kind of put my take. Garrett Nussmeier was the player that I hated. Guess what? Garrett Nussmeier got benched last week. I win, guys. Like I got the dub, and I got so much hate for that over the past 2 seasons, and I still have people telling me I'm wrong, whatever. But yeah, he got benched, guys. He got benched. Aaron and Andy, whoever wants to start, join me, brothers. Join me in this and have some fun with it, but help our listeners at the same time.
Well, I think the Nussmeier take was a company-wide idea, so uh, I'm happy to let you take the
Oh,
credit on that
100%.
one
I'm
because
I'm
you were
not trying to act like I was the only one, but
yeah.
like I mean, I was definitely the loudest.
All right. Well, I didn't have a player that I felt strongly enough about to be like, this is the next, you know, Devy stud that nobody else is talking about. But I do think that this player is somebody that's going to really fly up Devy boards in the offseason and for no reason at all the wrong reasons, and that is Michigan running back Jordan Marshall. Uh, he is having a really great season statistically, box scorey, now that Justice Haynes has been out with the foot surgery or whatever he had going on. Three back-to-back 100-yard games, 5 touchdowns in that span. But on the season, and even in those games, his big-time run rate is still below 5%. And even the last game of was it a bowl game, I think, last season, they put him in, and he had like 30 carries, again 100 yards, but big time run rate was like 3% in that game. Not much of a receiver. I think he's only got 7 catches on the year. Granted, when he's running routes, he's getting targeted, which it doesn't seem like he's running that many routes. But I think with Justice Haynes more than likely going pro this year, he's going to be elevated to a top 10 Devy running back, maybe even higher by most people. And I will just be all the way out on Jordan Marshall, which isn't to say he's not going to be like an effective CFF guy a la Emmett Johnson. He's going to get a ton of touches at Michigan because they run the ball a ton. He's going to probably have a lot of 100-yard games. He's probably going to score a ton of touchdowns. But for Devy purposes, and he might even get high draft capital because, NFL scouts, some of them love those box scores too. But when it comes to him being an NFL player, he just is not explosive enough. He's not dynamic enough. He's not going to be this RB1 type player that people are going to be expecting if they end up using like a first round dynasty rookie pick on him, or if they're valuing him that high, in C2C, not supplemental drafts, because I'm sure he's rostered in every C2C league right now. But, just for trading purposes or whatever, if you're valuing him as a top 12 running back, you're thinking way too highly of him. So, I don't have any Jordan Marshall. I certainly won't be trying to acquire Jordan Marshall in the offseason, but he is a guy I will be completely out on this offseason. And I have a very good feeling that he's going to be somebody that is going to be highly touted once the offseason begins.
I heard him touted on a pod today. So, and my lights just turned off. and Jeff is definitely vibing with me. He says Nuss stinks. Appreciate that. I wish we had more people that agreed with that, because it seems to only be one of the four of us for whatever reason.
All right. Well, as far as some things that I think are not even trying to be hot takey here, but just kind of putting our stamp out there. Like John said, we have to not be afraid when we're making these takes, but we're also trying not to be just hot take machines either, right? They have to be grounded in some sort of logic, whether it's some data, film, something to back it up. And what can we say is backed up more than Darian Mensah just being a stud at the quarterback position? You hear some rumblings out there, and we've been very pro Mensah on this podcast. He, for the longest time this season, he was my coming into the season hot take. This guy will be a top 5 quarterback, and he's certainly made the strides and done the things this season to deserve that, especially heading into next year as he likely returns for one more year of college. But he did have a 2 interception game this last week, so folks are like, "Ooh, yeah, Duke didn't beat UConn." Well, UConn's very good this season, and that's his first game of his career with 2 full seasons of starting that he's ever thrown a 2 interception game. So the guy, he does not make those mistakes very often. It just happened, unfortunately, 2 in 1 game, but he kind of rebounded as that game went along. He's been very efficient this season, effective with the ball, taking care of it. He's not a big-time rusher, right? He's not a guy who's going to get you a ton of fantasy points on the ground. So that's something he can improve on. But is he a precision passer? Does he have the functional mobility at least to function as a new age quarterback? Yes. And Darian Mensah has been impressive. He is a top 5 quarterback going into next season. He needs to be there for more folks. And I mean, he's kind of a sleeper if he declares this year for being like also a top 5 guy in this class. It's just, I don't know if that's going to happen, right? 1 year of starting at the Power 4 level, 2 years total starting. I know NFL front offices might be a little bit shy on that, but I think they're going to like Mensah when it's all said and done. And I guess it wouldn't be a Devy devotional podcast if I didn't tout my boy Deer Hill at Oregon as well, right? Called him the next Bucky, but he's just a guy I'm higher on than consensus. So I continue to tout him as a guy who just deserves respect, especially going into next year when there's more opportunity available. He's been efficient, explosive, capable receiver, all of these things. So Deer Hill firmly has my attention and admiration there as he continues to be a riser.
I like it. We got some hate, we got some love. With the Darian Mensah, I was actually looking at the UConn defense today because my quarterback in C2C is starting against them, and they have at least according to Fantrax, they have the 28th best pass defense in the nation out of 136 FBS schools. So that's pretty damn good. And those 2 interceptions bumped Mensa up to a 1.6% interception rate in his career, which is well within the realm that we're perfectly happy being in. Like, not an issue whatsoever. Anything even at 2%, 2% is kind of the highest range, but we can deal with 2%. I think Jackson Dart was right around 2% or something like that. Anything below two, you're gravy. In fact, especially when you're talking about pushing the ball down the field, the big time throw rate and stuff like that, and you still have that lower interception rate, that's when we start getting excited about these players, and that's where I say we're looking at thresholds with these players. We're building profiles with them, and Mensa's exciting. And I was listening to a podcast today with from C2C with Austin Nace and Colin Decker, and they were saying how I believe it was C2C Live, the podcast, and they were saying how it seems to them like Duke is almost the favorite to win the ACC at this point. And if that's the case, I started thinking about it. Okay, so now they're in the playoffs, right? Now they've won the ACC. They're in the playoffs. They're whatever they do in the playoffs. Now Mensa becomes even bigger of a name than he was prior. I really feel like Mensa's coming out this year, and I cannot guarantee that. I have no insider information, and I definitely could be wrong. But I feel the same way about Mensa this year as I felt about Jackson Dart last year, and everyone and their mother told me that Jackson Dart was going to be a third round pick in the NFL draft. And I mean, even in January, I think I've mentioned it multiple times on this pod, but in January I wrote I wrote an article for DLF, and NFLMockDraftDatabase.com had Jackson Dart as a third round pick at that point. And I said in the article, Jackson Dart is my 106. It was either 105 or 106. And this is going to surprise people, but this is where he belongs. And by the time the NFL draft comes around, I think that the NFL draft will, the NFL community will have come back to Jackson Dart is better than this, and he's going to be a first round pick. That's how I feel about Darian Mensah right now. Like I said, I cannot guarantee. Obviously, he's kind of right at that like bare minimum of games played and only 1 year at the Power Four level and all that kind of stuff. But I'm right with Aaron. We're gonna hold hands and scream at the mountaintops. Darian Mensah, QB1 in the class. So yeah, I really hope he does come out. If he doesn't, obviously that's going to make the 2027 class just that much better. But I love the call out there. And Jeff says the 2026 QB class is not good, and trust me, dude, we know it's getting worse by the day. And if Vincent doesn't come out, it's gonna only be even worse than that. I wasn't 100% sure that I was gonna come up with a new one. I was reading some things. Okay. So I wasn't 100% sure I was going to come up with a new one, but I came up with a new one. Okay. Garrett Nussmeier got benched. I win. It's time to come up with a new hate. Okay. Here it is, boys. Dante Moore, you're my new Garrett Nussmeier. I really cannot wait for the next year, because he already said he's coming back to school. I cannot wait for the next year and a half of everyone telling me how Dante Moore is the QB1 in the class, and then by the end of it, Dante Moore isn't even a top 5 QB in the class. Dante Moore is not good at football. He is Will Levis light and Garrett Nussmeier Jr.
Ooh, that's bold. That'll get the people going as a spicy Diablo take, something like that. But yeah, that's fair. We've seen a lot of different versions of Dante Moore this season, right? The game manager, the at times gunslinger or explosive rushing threat, but he's not consistently any of those things, right? He's not a consistent player yet at this point. I still think that there's a chance he's still a pretty solid quarterback, but I am not nearly quite as high as at one point this season where I thought he was just going to keep ascending, keep steadily building on what he's done. So, I mean, yes, there's some limitations that he's dealing with within that wide receiver room. I mean, DeCorian Moore's now banged up. He doesn't have Evan Marshall this season. You can, or Evan Stewart, right? Yes. But yeah, there's a couple different reasons you can point to for limitations, but yeah, the guy has not done what he needs to do to be considered like such a consensus, like, oh, he's a top two quarterback in this coming class. It's like, I'm not buying into that level, at least with Dante Moore. But hey, that's fair to put your stamp on it and say this guy's not all that he is said to be.
Yeah. I'm not a like a Dante Moore guy by any means, but I don't put him in the same realm as Nussmeier. But I do think that he probably was overhyped. If you look at mock drafts today, even though, you're seeing reports that he's coming back next year, he's still like mocked as a top 5, top 10 pick in the 2026 draft. So, um, it's hard because this year is so bad for QBs, and it wasn't any better for Dante Moore. Like it would kill. Apparently, it would kill us if we had one quarterback in all of college football who could throw for 10 yards per attempt this year, because it literally has not happened unless it's a service academy quarterback like John's Liam Zarka, who he picked up for CFF only purposes. But aside from that, like there's nobody. There's like no, the efficiency at the quarterback position is at an all-time low, which is just you hate to see
Darian
it.
Mensa,
Obviously,
9.7. 9.7. Pretty close.
Mensa's getting there. Yeah, and I'm with you guys, and I was unfortunately like in the off season, it was between John Mateer and Darian Mensa. I went the wrong way, and I went more Mateer than I did Mensa, even though I liked both of them. But really, how I should have been looking at it is like Mensa is immensely cheaper. Maybe I should just, since I feel pretty similarly about them, I'll go with Mensa. But that's not what happened, and Mensa ended up being the correct one to do. And I'm with you guys on Mensa too. I think he's absolutely going to be, if not in this class, the QB1. Certainly next year he will be the QB1. Um, but yeah, the Dante Moore thing, I'm here for the spiciness of it. I just don't know that he's going to be like so bad that he's getting benched or anything next year. I think he's just he's a good enough quarterback to where he can probably win Oregon some games.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I mean, it's not a college QB thing. I'm talking for NFL purposes. There's plenty of look at what uh, Will Howard did at Ohio State. He won a national championship. This is not, you can't have accolades, and he could even win a Heisman for all I care. I'm talking about for NFL purposes. Dante Moore is not going to be good. I don't think he's going to win a Heisman, honestly. And um, well, what was I just gonna say? Oh man, I completely lost my train of thought. You were talking about
I got a question
Dante.
for you while you're
Yeah, go
gathering
ahead.
some
Go ahead.
thoughts. Jaden Maeva, USC quarterback, or Dante Moore? I know I was putting you on the spot a little bit, but oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Oops, sorry. Was there a neither option?
No, well, I mean, I guess, but no, I'm just kind of curious where you're at with like the Gunnar Stocktons of the world, or I mean, I know I probably shouldn't throw Brennan Sorsby in there, right? Sorsby's more of a cool story rather than like a legit prospect kind of thing, right? But those types of guys, do you have Dante Moore still ahead of that type of a crowd?
I do, but not
Yeah,
much. It's like two spots.
yeah,
I
yeah.
literally have Sorsby one spot ahead of Maeva, and I have Moore 3 spots ahead of Sorsby. So it's not much. It's not saying much as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man,
Dante
I thought I had like a great thing and I completely lost it. So now I'm just mad.
Well, here's one for you. I feel like Dante Moore should be viewed more in the same light as like what Demond Williams from Washington's being viewed as right now, because I feel like they're very similar, passing wise, and having that rushing upside. Demond Williams probably more of a runner than Dante Moore is, but from a passing standpoint, like how can you say that Dante Moore is any better than Demond Williams Jr., who's doing it in the same conference, playing against the same competition, and having very similar season?
I think the only thing that people would probably say, and Aaron will probably be the first one to say it, is obviously the size difference with Demond Williams. That's always been an issue. Even and he hasn't been playing that well, honestly. He's been playing pretty poorly recently, but even when he was playing better, when he was playing worse competition, kind of
Looked good
like
against
Dante Moore
Illinois.
was. Well, yeah, but yeah, even when he was, it was always like, yeah, but he's like 5'9" or whatever he is, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trust
Nothing
me,
to.
he's been like at one point he was Williams was actually fairly high in Devy Beth. That was earlier in the season, you know, before things really like calmed down. Like I've said in the past, you know, like it gets pretty crazy the first like few weeks of the season in Devy Beth, just because you have all these teams playing FCS teams and whatever else. Williams was up there for a while, and I always just kind of looked at him like, "Hey, you stay up there. Maybe I'll, you know, put my stamp on you." But he did not. He fell off pretty hard, I would say, especially recently.
Yeah, yeah, right. He's more of a fun quarterback, but I will say with Dante Moore, just trying to put a little bit of context into the last few weeks of production there against Iowa. Very tough defense, right? So and missing his best wide receiver, Decory Moore, just just struggling there. I think even one of their other wide receivers got injured that game. So, not totally surprising to see them struggle a little bit, even though they still won the game. And then the previous week against Wisconsin, that was that really like torrential downpour game. Is that correct, Andy? But I don't know for sure if Andy was watching it, but I want to say that was like the weather game where it's like, yes, he passed for 86 yards, but in like a normal game in normal conditions, very much a different type of thing from a production standpoint and from a proficiency standpoint. So he was kind of rolling before that point. Not saying he was perfect by any means this season, right? We've talked about some of the shortcomings, I guess, with Dante Moore's profile. But just a little bit of context over the last couple of weeks. Tough competition and or weather just impacting things. Not going to excuse that by any means, but you know that definitely skews things, right? The last 2 weeks is a big reason I think he's fallen off, at least from a production standpoint, cumulatively.
Yeah, honestly, I feel so similarly to how I felt about Nussmeier with Moore, and I've always basically been out on Moore, except for I was actually the one that said, hey, I was really excited about him starting at USCLA because we could see who he was from the beginning. He was a 5-star prospect or a high 4-star. I think he was a 5-star. High or a 5-star prospect going to UCLA. We get to see him start in year one. I was super excited for him, and I said, "Go draft that guy." And and then immediately I was like, "Never mind. I'm so sorry. That was bad." And since then, like my mind really hasn't changed. And oh, that's what I was gonna say. I kept thinking it was about Dante Moore, but it was actually about Mensa. I don't like patting myself on the back, but I'm gonna do it this one time, just for the podcast listeners. Going back to what I was saying about like what I want Devy analysts to do, I gave Aaron the hot take. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard when he mentioned Mensa as a top five QB in the class in our hot takes pod. I thought it was insane. And Andy was saying like he was kind of torn between Mateer and Mensa. I really wasn't. I did not like Mensa at that point. At least, it just didn't seem like it was going to work out. His numbers needed to be better. But everything he's done is better, even than what he was doing at the lower level this year. He's doing even better, and so that's what I'm saying. Don't stick to your guns. Don't be stuck in your ways. I was wrong about Darian Mensa, and now I'm screaming from the mountaintops. Go draft Darian Mensa. He's the best QB that we have. So for this one time only, I'm gonna pat myself on the back and say, hey, I was quick to turn around. Not even a half a season or whatever, and that's what I want other Devy analysts to do. I'm challenging everyone, anyone listening to this, you're Devy analyst or just a listener, just don't be stuck in your ways when it comes to these players, and be willing to accept that these players change and things change with them.
I like
And
it. I like it. Good stuff.
I'd just quickly add to that, like, it's okay to have your own opinion, because I feel like even when I'm listening to mock drafts for the 2026 NFL draft or whatever, the dynasty drafts, it seems like you're just looking at the same one over and over again. Okay, here's Denzel Boston, here's Chris Bell. Here's all, they just fall into the same place over and over. And then you look at Mel Kiper's rankings, and they're all very similar. Like, it's okay to say maybe Hollywood Smothers is one of the top three running backs in this class. Maybe in you're just the first one to figure that out, and nobody else has caught on yet. But as we get closer and closer to the draft, and more people will. It's just take a chance. You don't have to just keep echoing in what everyone else is saying, because that's what everyone else is saying.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it needs to be a hot take and you just, throwing darts at a wall. Like we're saying these things because we believe them. We're saying them because like we have reason to believe it, whether it's right or wrong. And so we're not just trying to throw darts at a wall and hope for the best. We're saying, like these are things that I believe in. I don't believe that Dante Moore is going to be good, especially considering his price right now, how the consensus is feeling about him, like all those things. What the price that you could get right now for a Dante Moore on the Devy or C2C, price range, yeah, give me that all day long rather than holding on to Moore for another season and hoping for the best and then getting the Nussmeyer treatment. Um, and that I did have one last thing, and we're already over an hour, so it's going to be really quick. But I feel like a lot of people try to rank for who's going to be drafted in the NFL draft at points. But like, who cares? Like, does anyone care that Xavier Legette was a first round pick? Does anyone care that Michael Penix Jr. Was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft? Like, does any of that matter? No. What matters is if they're good or not, And there might be the slightest little bit of a bump or whatever, but I've found in my experience that people don't actually take advantage of those value bumps or value boosts, and they actually hold on because they go, oh well, now that Michael Penix Jr. is a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, I want him because the NFL believes in him. So now I want him, and then they hold on to that player, and then later on they go, oh wait, he's actually really bad. This is not good. Xavier Legette doesn't know how to catch a football. Oh no, what do I do? So I would also challenge people to not try to focus on where someone will be drafted, but if they will actually be good once they make it to the NFL. And that's always been my goal of finding is I don't really care. I mean, like Alec Iman gets drafted in the fourth round. I don't really care. But guess what? He's the wide receiver one on the Titans, whether that means anything or not right now. But he's the wide receiver one on the Titans right now, whether he's a fourth round pick or not.
That's all fair. I like where our heads are at and some of the strategies for next year and some of those player takes too. We'll see how they age, but I think we have a pretty solid process as we've kind of laid out before. So nice work, guys.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I got ranty. I mean I did mean to get ranty, but I don't want to like talk down to people or anything like that. That's definitely never the goal. I want this to be fun. I want this to be enjoyable for listeners, and I want it to be educational as well. But I appreciate you guys listening. I think we've already gotten enough words of wisdom tonight, so I don't think we need to prolong this anymore. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here, and we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Gridiron Ratings. Thank you, DLF. We'll be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you soon.